Welcome back to Milan Recording Studios. My name is James Pavel Shakras, and before we get into the content of today's video, which is these tiny instruments sitting here in front of us, I wanted to talk about the room that I'm in, because as you can hear, my voice sounds different than usual. I'm actually here in Studio B today, and that's partly because I needed a large flat surface to put these instruments on, and that's where we have this table. But the reason that Studio B is so much different from Studio A is actually intentional, and that's mostly because of the instruments that we've chose to put in this room. If you look behind me here, maybe if I lean over you can see them a little better, we've got a marimba, we've got vibraphone, there's also a harpsichord back there behind my head, I think, and so these are all instruments that really benefit from having a live sounding room that isn't dry. If you were to take the harpsichord or the marimba into Studio A, they wouldn't sound very good at all. But here in Studio B, they sound absolutely wonderful. They fill the room, and it just adds a lot to the tone when recording those instruments. So that's why I'm here in Studio B. Let me know what you think of the sound, if I should do more videos up here. It's perhaps not the greatest thing for spoken word, but I think it will still be interesting, and also a different scenario and environment than I usually film my videos in. So, what are these little instruments sitting here on the table? Well, as you can see by the title of the video, these are Kawai's smallest pianos. And technically, they're not pianos. Pianos, of course, would have strings that are struck by hammers, and the hammers in these instruments are striking little aluminum tubes. So they're really idiophones and not percussion string instruments. But nonetheless, they look like pianos. Kawai markets them as pianos, and so for the sake of discussion in today's video, I'll be referring to them as pianos. Kawai makes 4 different models of these, I believe. You've got the upright version over here, you've got the grand version here, and then you also have the smaller version of the grand. And I believe Kawai also makes a version of the grand that the lid does not open. And although these are toy pianos, they actually do have some musical qualities to them that would make them really nice in a recording, and even by themselves, they're a lot of fun to play. And although, once again, they are toy pianos, each one has its own personality, just like real pianos would. So what we're going to be doing in today's video is taking a look at all 3 of them, because they are all slightly different, and seeing which one would be better for what situation. And there's actually a lot of people out there who are deeply into toy pianos. They like to record with them, they just like the idea. I like the idea myself too. I think they look really, really cute. So we're going to be taking a look at these today, and hopefully those of you out there who are deeply in love with toy pianos enjoy this video. I just love how cute these little things are. So let's give you a closer view of these. I'm going to come around to the other side of the table so we can begin discussing and performing on these instruments. Well, let's start off the video with what is, in my opinion, the weakest of these instruments. It is, however, still absolutely adorable, and it looks pretty large until I bring my hand into frame, and then you can see just how tiny this little instrument is. You have a range of 2 octaves on this instrument, and the build of it is made entirely of plastic. Now, Kawai makes 3 different versions of the grand piano that I know of. I think I might have said this already in the video, but there is a version of this where the lid does not open at all, and there's just large round holes in the top cover to allow the sound to come out. Then you have this version, which is the mid-range version and the mid-priced version, and then you have the larger grand, which we'll get into later on in the video, which is the best made, the best build quality, and the highest price, but in my opinion, it's worth it. Now, although as a whole, I don't particularly like this instrument compared to the others, it does have one redeeming quality, which we will get into in a little bit here. However, some of its negative aspects are that it doesn't have as long of a sustain as the other instruments, and that the action is definitely inferior to the others. Yes, I'm going to evaluate the action of a toy piano. I'm going to be pretending that these are, not pretending, but what I'm going to be doing is kind of evaluating these on all the same aspects that I would evaluate a professional level instrument on. Build quality, sound quality, feel of the action, all that stuff. We're going to apply that to a toy piano and see what happens. So the build quality on this is, well, it's cheap plastic. It is a toy after all, and it is the more affordable version. I don't know how much the plastic affects the tone. It may actually affect the tone positively, interestingly enough, because this instrument has more power and a louder tone than the other 2 instruments we will explore today. However, the drawback, much like in a real acoustic piano, some real powerful pianos have short sustain, and oftentimes if a real acoustic piano has short sustain in the treble, sometimes manufacturers, sometimes technicians will artificially brighten up and harden the hammers in that region to give it more power, creating the illusion of having more sustain. So like a real piano, it's powerful, but not a lot of sustain, and you'll hear that when I go to play it. I'm just going to play a couple of notes here, and you will hear the tone of this instrument. Having said that though, its tone is actually still kind of nice. It is very powerful and punchy, so if you were a sort of person who wanted to use a toy piano in a live situation for whatever reason, this would be an option, but its other major drawback is that you only have 2 octaves. The other 2 models we'll be talking about are 2.5 octaves, and although that may not sound like a large range increase, the amount of music you can play on this compared to the others is greatly reduced. There's only a few little samples of music that I would really be able to play on here. One of them that I don't run out of keys for is this. However, as soon as I went to go do the melody, you would run out of keys if you were to do it up here, but you could do it an octave lower down here. Stuff like that. So you can play a little bit of music on it, but its biggest drawback, in my opinion, compared to the other 2 toy pianos, is the action. It's very inconsistent. This B flat especially is very resistive and very heavy, and then some of the others, like these last few notes up here, feel really great and very consistent. So again, like actual professional musical instruments, especially real acoustic pianos, the actions on all 3 of these will vary, which is really interesting. This one, though, I think is the worst. If we take a listen to playing all of the notes at roughly the same volume, you'll hear that many of them will drop out. These 3 in particular are some of the worst. Some of the other ones down here were weaker. The really nice thing about these Kawai toy pianos is that, especially with the other 2 models, you can actually play dynamics. You can play very quietly, or you can play very loudly. But because the action of this one isn't as good as the others, the ability to play quiet is greatly reduced, and you will tend to drop more notes and things, especially if you're using these 3 notes right here for some reason. There you go. That F, that B flat. I was trying to play quiet there, but you really can't, so all I was able to do was play loud. One really cool thing, though, about this as well as the other Grand model is that the lid here, it actually does stuff. On this one, you can just open it up all the way for some reason, apparently, so you can kind of see the inside here. This is where the tone bars go, and that's what produces your sound. You can, however, like a real piano, close it, and it will actually have a massive effect on the tone. Which I think is really, really cool, and that's a neat little bit about these instruments. And I think part of the reason they may have done that, and it seems to be especially effective with this instrument, is perhaps because these are made for children, really. If a child was playing this and perhaps the parent was being annoyed by it, the parent could simply come over and tell the child to close the lid, and then that's going to reduce the volume by half, so the child can still enjoy playing the music, but it's not going to be as loud and perhaps annoying to the parents if they didn't feel like listening to music. So that, I think, is something that's really cool about these. You can close the lid and drastically alter the tone. However, that is just about everything there is to talk about this particular instrument. It is very, very cute, but in my opinion, it is not the best of the 3 that we will be talking about today. You have the smaller range, you have the inferior action, and the tone quality is louder, but with less sustain. Here's the lowest note. I'm going to play the lowest note, let it ring out to its entirety so you can hear what that sounds like. You can hear it dies away pretty quickly. None of the notes have dampers on them, so they will always be sustaining. So you can hear that that dies away pretty quickly. And when we test out the other 2, you will hear that they have a lot more sustain. And I think with this out of the way, it is now time to turn our attention to one of the larger models. Here we have the upright model of the Kawai tiny toy piano, and as you can see, it looks starkly different from the tiny grand that we have already seen. One of the big differences is that this is actually made entirely of wood. The only non-wood components are the keys themselves, the action mechanism, and the tubes in the inside. If you go check out my original video I made of this, I actually take it apart and show the inside and how it works. So when you're done watching this, you might be interested to go check out that to see what makes this instrument tick. But the build quality of this thing is excellent. It almost feels like it's a professional level instrument as far as the build quality is concerned. You've got solid wood all over the place, and it's really, really cool. Kawai makes a few different versions of these. Internally, I believe them to be the same, but they do come in a few different colors. You can get it in black, you can get it in the blonde wood, and you can also get it in white. And I think there may be a fourth version that is white with some little black designs on the front of the instrument here, which look very cute. The other thing you can see that's different between this and the Grand we've already seen is that we now have extra notes up here. The original range of that first piano we saw only went up to here. It was from F to F and then to the F above that F, so you had 2 octaves to play with. Now we have an extra half octave, and although that may not seem like a lot of extra notes, it actually unlocks a lot of music that this instrument can play that the previous instrument couldn't play. For example, this, which is right at home on this instrument. Because the previous instrument capped out at this high G, at this high F, you aren't able to play that little bit from Sugar Plum Fairy because the top note is a G. So the previous Grand just couldn't even dream of playing that piece of music. You can also play some other stuff on here too that really uses these higher notes. If you remember, I mentioned before that the previous Grand, the little plastic one, didn't have very long sustain, and as you can probably hear, this instrument has a lot of sustain. Take a look at the lowest note. Like, it's still going, but you probably can't hear it anymore. It has heaps and heaps of sustain, which gives it a very, very nice sound. For quicker music, it may be a little bit on the muddy side, but it still has a very, very nice tone that sustains and sounds rather full. You can actually play some pretty intricate music on these. I'm going to try to play the first little bit of Scarlatti's Keyboard Sonata K1 on this, and we'll see what happens. The action of this instrument is remarkably, remarkably light. I said in my original video that if you put a mouse on the keys and had it walk across, it would actually make music. And although I don't have a pet mouse to test this with, I still believe it to be true. And that is perhaps one of the very few disadvantages to this instrument. The action is so incredibly light that it becomes very, very easy to play wrong notes on accent simply because your thumb will just ever so gently brush up against another key and make it sound. When I took my hand off of the key, I accidentally struck one of those notes and made it sound. But nonetheless, this is a super, super fun instrument to play, and as a whole, I like it a lot more than the smaller Grand that we've looked at already in the video. Coming up next, though, we have a larger Grand, and that one is my favorite. Let's check it out. The final Kawai piano in today's lineup is the large Grand, which I guess in the world of tiny Kawai pianos would be the equivalent of a concert Grand. It's actually very similar in many aspects to the upright that we've already looked at. You've got the same range, it has a similar tone quality, and a similar amount of sustain. Not quite as much as on the upright piano, but still an excellent amount that really makes it sound great. Now, the reason I have two versions of the Grand, I have the nice one here and I have the smaller, cheaper model, is because I didn't actually know at first there were different versions. Then when I bought the tiny one, the tiny Grand that we've already seen in this video, and I realized that it's not as nice as the upright piano, I then decided to do some deeper diving, and I found that this version is distinctly different from the Grand we've already seen in the video. So if you're interested in buying a Kawai Grand piano, to the tiny version that we see here, and you're very particular like I am about which one you get, here's some ways you can tell the difference between them. First of all, the obvious one that I'm still kicking myself for not noticing is that this has your full 2.5 octaves. You've got from F to F the next F, and then up to C, whereas as we've already seen, the tinier version of the Grand only goes up to F. And again, I'm still surprised I didn't notice that when I bought it online. You can also tell by looking at the inside of pictures of the smaller Grand online that the inside of the smaller version is made of a molded golden plastic, whereas this is certainly not plastic. This is actually like a particle board type of thing with this white, sometimes it's a gold color, this little metal vent hole, but in this particular model it's white. So the inside of the Grand, that's the smaller version that we've already seen, is definitely different from the inside here. The other difference here is that the lid prop on this is very similar to a real piano. The attention to detail here is amazing. It has an actual metal hinge that connects to the bottom of the lid prop. When you raise the lid, which I'll do from up here so you can see it, the hinge folds down and allows the lid prop to lay on the inside like on a real piano. But what's different about this compared to a real piano and compared to the tinier Grand is that there's also a second little thing in here that hopefully you can see. There's a little rope in here that's a little bit of elastic that prevents you from opening the lid up all the way. I'm pushing up on it and it doesn't want to open up anymore. You could remove this if you wanted to, but it creates this interesting aesthetic of almost having two lid props in the same spot, which looks kind of cool. So I kind of like it. And the smaller Grand that we've already seen doesn't have that. And as I've already mentioned, there's even a cheaper version of the Kawai piano where the lid doesn't open up at all, but these are typically bright red and pink, and so there's not too much confusion there. With all of that out of the way, let's take a look and see how this instrument is made and how it's built. One thing that separates it from a real acoustic piano aesthetically is that it actually has four legs. You've got two underneath right here where my hands are. You've got another one that's on this side right under here, and then you've got one in the back corner like on a real acoustic piano. So that's kind of funny that it's got four legs, but it still looks really nice and it still looks really cool. And I've saved this one for last because it is, in my opinion, the best one. The action is the best, the tone I think is probably the best, and the playing experience is awesome. The build quality of it is just like the upright we've already seen. It's got all wooden sides with the particle board top here. On the upright piano, this was the back panel. On this here, it's the little top panel. And the insides are all pretty much the same, although of course the action is modified to be a Grand format that more than likely strikes from below, whereas the upright strikes from the front. It's kind of a hanging thing on the upright. You can check out my old video of it if you want to see the insides of the upright. I'm not actually sure how this one comes apart, or I would have made a video taking this one apart and showing you all. But nonetheless, let's play some music on it and you will hear the slight sonic differences this has compared to the upright. As you can hear there, this instrument plays absolutely excellently, and it actually, in my opinion, has the best action. Although it's a little bit heavier than the upright's action, and it's not quite as consistent, it still feels really, really great, and that slight heaviness really is an advantage to the player because you'll be much less likely to play wrong notes on accident due to the small size and light weight of the keys, and it just feels a lot more locked in and more predictable. You could hear when I played the Japanese music here, that repeated note didn't come out so great on the upright. But on this one here, you have no problems doing repeated notes, doing trills, and with the segue about trills, let's play the same excerpt from Scarlatti's Keyboard Sonata K1 and see how that works on here. As you can hear, that sounds dramatically better on the grand version than on the upright. If I'm being frank, my performance on the upright was a little bit sloppy. There were some extra notes that got accidentally triggered by my fingers, and the trills were rather sloppy on the upright, simply because the action of the upright, although nice, doesn't actually facilitate doing trills very well at all, whereas on here, you can actually do trills very easily, and they come out very cleanly. As far as sustain is concerned, let's take a listen to the lowest note on here. It's still going a little bit. It's kind of somewhere in between the upright and the smaller grand. It's not quite as long as the upright, but it's still a lot longer than the tiny grand we've already taken a look at in today's video. This, in my opinion, is by far the best toy piano that Kawai makes. The sound is excellent. The playing experience is by far the best. Let's do that action test where I play a gentle chromatic scale up the whole instrument. There are only 2 notes in there that dropped, and if I hit them a tiny bit harder, they sounded, so that was possibly even my fault more than the instrument. You can also hear that I was able to play that very quietly. This instrument has a pretty nice dynamic range. It's a lot of fun to play, and it's really fantastic. Now, although these instruments are geared toward children, you can definitely see where these would actually have a real place in actual professional level music. I could totally imagine putting these in a recording if I needed a glockenspiel type of sound. I do have a toy glockenspiel, which sounds nice, but if I wanted to do some more complex notes and some really polyphonic music, I could use one of these instead of layering together 5 different tracks on my glockenspiel. So these instruments are really cool, and I've also gotten some questions over the years from people who have hand conditions that prevent them from playing a real piano due to pain, which is unfortunate. For those of you looking for a keyboard instrument with an incredibly light action, this is an option. The keys are small and you do have a small range, but I don't think that these instruments would cause anyone any pain at all to play. The action, even on this one, which is slightly heavier than the upright model, is incredibly light, incredibly easy to play. You could hear there it made a couple of the notes sound when I just barely put my hand on the key. So for anyone who's looking for an incredibly easy instrument to play action-wise, as far as the weight is concerned, these toy pianos definitely would be your an option for you. Particularly the nice version of the grand seen here and the upright that we've already seen. Both of those have very nice, very consistent actions, but between the two, I definitely prefer the nice grand that we see here. Just like the smaller grand though, you can actually lower the lid. It doesn't have as dramatic of an effect because the tone is a little bit quieter on this to begin with than the smaller grand, but let's do a little comparison of that. It also looks really cute with the lid closed too. So it has a little bit of a darker tone there that you can hear when you close the lid, and so it sounds a little bit different. Very quiet. That was very gentle. I like that. Now we open up the lid. A little brighter and punchier. So those are the 3 Kawai pianos that I have here at the studio, and I think all of them are adorable and all of them are cool, but this one is by far the best. If you thought these Kawai toy pianos were tiny, well, boy, do I have a surprise for you. Here's an even smaller toy piano. This is not made by Kawai, this is made by Schimmel, but I still thought I would put it in the list, or in this video, just because it's a toy piano that has the name of a real piano maker on it. So this was made by actually Playmobil. I said made by Schimmel, but it's not. It was made in 1989. That's when the little decal, or the little embossed thing on the back here says. But what this originally did apparently was you could push the key down, or the entire keyboard itself, just mash it into the key bed, and then and it would play some sort of a tune or a music through the sound of this. The battery is dead, and I don't know how to replace it, so it doesn't do anything anymore, but it's still very, very cute. And I bought this because I thought it was like I thought it was like the same size as the Kawai upright, and I just thought that was really cool, but unfortunately it's not. It's a Playmobil thing, but it does have the Schimmel logo on it, and for those of you who don't know, Schimmel is a German piano maker that many people respect and adore. So I just thought it was really cool that Kawai isn't the only real piano maker who also has dived into the world of toy pianos. I really hope you all enjoyed this video of Kawai's toy pianos. It's been fun to take a look at toy pianos and evaluate them as if they were serious professional musical instruments, and part of the reason I'm able to do this with these, especially the larger grand and the upright, is because they're almost built as well as a professional instrument would be. Sure, the action perhaps isn't ideal, but the build quality and the tone that these instruments can produce certainly would fit well into a mix, and the build quality, what I meant by that was that they're built very, very sturdily. They are made with quality components, and they also look really great as well. So I really hope that you all enjoyed this video. It's been really fun to take a look at these instruments, and hopefully you have all felt the same way. If you did enjoy this, you might want to go check out the rest of my channel. I've got lots of cool videos about real acoustic pianos. You can also go watch the video of the tiny upright piano by itself. I actually take that one apart and I show you the inside of how it works, so you can see those aluminum tubes and how it works like that. So there's all kinds of cool videos of these things on my channel. You can also go check out my second channel, Milan Recording Studios, where I show really cool performances from myself and from ETSU and behind the scenes things here at the studio. And finally, if you want, you can sign up for my Patreon, and if you do any of those things, that would be really, really amazing, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.